In the last episode of Ancient Egypt, Dynasty by Dynasty, we saw how a Persian civil war helped the Egyptian rebel Amyrtaeus break free from Persian rule over Egypt. By around 400 BC, Amyrtaeus, a prince from the delta city of Saite, appears to have held control over all of Egypt, with his authority recognized as far south as Elephantine. He had waged a guerrilla campaign against Persia's Achaemenid Dynasty for at least 6 years, first against Darius II, and then continuing under the reign of his successor, Artaxerxes II, before he could legitimately claim the title of king of the two lands. Aside from the various details of campaigns recorded by the Greek historians mentioned in the last episode, which, for the sake of time, I won't repeat here, almost nothing else is known about Amyrtaeus' life. His death, however, came swiftly. By 399 BC, less than a year after being officially recognized as king over all of Egypt, he was dead, killed in battle against the forces of a certain Nepherites of the XXVIII, better known by his Greek name, Nepherites of Mendes. Again, the details of his demise are scarce, but what little documentation we have tells us that Amyrtaeus was captured and executed in Memphis. An Aramaic document known as Brooklyn 13 suggests this took place in October of 399 BC. And so ended what was perhaps the shortest of ancient Egypt's recognized dynasties, the 28th. Nepherites then crowned himself pharaoh and moved the capital to his stronghold at Mendes in the Delta region. As Nepherites I, he founded the dynasty that Egyptologists today recognize as the country's 29th. To strengthen his authority, Nepherites I, like many rulers before him, looked to the past for legitimacy, identifying himself as a guardian of the traditions of the pre-Persian Saite Renaissance. Evidence from his reign shows an increase in building projects and inscriptions, mostly in northern Egypt, though he also contributed to a few minor yet significant works at Karnak, such as a storeroom. Nepherites portrayed himself as a devoted follower of the sacred cult of the Apis bull, as confirmed by inscriptions uncovered at Saqqara. From Mendes in the delta to Karnak in the south, his building activity demonstrated that after overthrowing Amyrtaeus, his authority and influence over all of Egypt had been firmly established. His position was further secured by the fact that Egypt's main threat, the weakened but still formidable Persian Empire, was preoccupied with conflicts in the Mediterranean and Aegean. With Egypt free from Persian rule and a native king, Nepherites, on the throne, strategy shifted from preventing any Achaemenid attempt at reconquest. As with earlier defenses against the Assyrians and Babylonians centuries before, this meant competing for control of the eastern Mediterranean coast. To support both defensive and offensive operations, Nepherites already had a fleet at his disposal, likely formed from the capture of Thmos's ships by his predecessor Amyrtaeus, and possibly supplemented by what remained of the old Persian fleet once stationed at Memphis. While not massive, it was still capable of threatening key cities like Gaza and Ashkelon along the Persian Empire's frontier. It's worth noting that during Xerxes' invasion of Greece in 480 BC, Egypt had contributed at least 200 warships to the Persian navy. There's no reason to believe that these shipyards ceased production under Nepherites. If anything, they could have readily built more vessels to strengthen his fleet. With several hundred ships in Nepherites' arsenal, the Persian garrison stationed in forts along the coast would have struggled to hold them without substantial reinforcements. From the Persian perspective, Egypt was not an independent nation, but a rebellious province of the empire. To Artaxerxes II, Nepherites was no legitimate king, but an opportunistic Delta prince who needed to be brought to heel. Retaking Egypt would require an armada to counter Nepherites' fleet, a siege to capture Memphis before advancing into the Delta, and an army large enough to hold the city while pushing deeper into the country. Such a campaign demanded time and large-scale preparations. But before any of that could happen, Artaxerxes needed to ensure that the eastern Mediterranean was firmly under his control. His forces moved quickly to secure the region. According to the Athenian soldier turned historian Xenophon, in late summer or early autumn of 397 BC, a Syracusan merchant named Herodes spotted a large gathering of Phoenician warships. Xenophon tells us, "A man from Syracuse named Herodes, who was in Phoenicia with a certain shipowner, observed there a number of Phoenician triremes, some of which were being fitted out, others that were already manned and prepared for sea, and still others that were sailing in from elsewhere. When he heard that 300 triremes in all were being prepared, he went on board the first ship making for Greece, and reported to the Spartans that the Persian king and Tissaphernes were fitting out this large naval force. But he knew nothing about where it was to sail. The Spartans were alarmed and called together their allies in order to confer on what should be done." Xenophon gives us the impression that both Herodes and the Spartans believed this fleet was bound for the Aegean. However, in hindsight, scholars, both in antiquity and today, have made the case that the newly assembled Persian fleet was meant to secure the eastern Mediterranean and prevent an Egyptian strike against Persian holdings there. In other words, mobilizing the fleet was a defensive rather than offensive move. In the end, Nepherites chose not to confront the Persians directly, but instead backed their enemy at the time, Sparta. According to the historian Diodorus Siculus, in 396 BC, Nepherites supported the Spartan king Agesilaus in a war against Artaxerxes II. By this time, the Spartans had already taken Cyprus and Rhodes, and were seeking to extend their influence further east. Nepherites sent them a massive shipment of grain and enough materials to build 100 warships. However, the grain arrived at Rhodes just after the Persians had retaken the island, and the entire cargo was seized by Conon of Athens, a naval commander in Persian service. And so, ultimately, Nepherites' efforts actually aided the Persians and their allies in the Aegean. While it's generally agreed that Nepherites died around 393 BC, the question of who his true successor was, and his relationship to him, is debated due to the limited evidence available. There appears to have been a struggle for the throne after his death. According to one view, the successor was Pasherenmut, better known by his Greek name, Samuthis. His reign lasted only a year before he was overthrown by a certain Hakor, or Hagar, whose name appears in Greek as Achaemenid, and in some texts as Hakoris. According to Egyptologists Aidan Dodson and Dylan Hilton, Pasherenmut, aka Samuthis, was presumably Nepherites' son. Hakor, or Hakoris, who overthrew him after a year, was not his son. While some have speculated that Hakor may have been related to the royal family, there's currently no evidence to support this. Another interpretation holds that, upon Nepherites' death, there was a contest for the throne involving Hakoris, Samuthis, and possibly another man named Muthis, though the latter's very existence is debated. In this scenario, Egyptologist John D. Ray suggests that Hakoris began as Nepherites' legitimate heir and ruled peacefully for about 2 years before being overthrown by Samutis. Roughly a year later, Hakoris regained the throne and resumed his sovereignty over the country as though the interruption had never occurred, as evidenced by his continuation to count the years of his reign from his original coronation. Mutis, if he indeed existed, may have been involved in this struggle, but his role remains unknown. This version of events has several supporters, including noted Egyptologist Toby Wilkinson. Regardless of the exact chain of events, most Egyptologists are of the opinion that Hakoris, or whichever name of his you prefer, ended up ruling for between 13 to 14 years. Hakoris worked hard to present himself as the legitimate successor to Nepherites, even linking his name with Nepherites on monuments and naming his own son after him, likely to forge a connection that never truly existed. His reign was marked by extensive building and restoration projects, as well as active involvement in the politics of the region. A major turning point came in 387 BC with the Peace of Antalcidas, better known as the King's Peace between Persia and several of the major Greek states. After this treaty, only Egypt and Cyprus continued to oppose the Achaemenids and Artaxerxes II. In 385 BC, the Persians launched an attack on Egypt, sparking a 3-year war. By its end, the Persians seem to have lost some of their resolve. The resulting Egyptian victory briefly boosted Hakoris' standing on the regional stage, though, as we'll see, this wouldn't last long. In 381 BC, Hakoris sent money and 50 triremes to support King Evagoras of Cyprus in his resistance against Persian rule. Artaxerxes' attention had apparently shifted from Egypt to the strategically vital island in the Mediterranean. The following year, Evagoras requested additional aid, but Hakoris declined to commit more military forces, though he did provide further funds. It was not enough. Soon after, Evagoras surrendered to Artaxerxes II. Egypt now stood alone in opposing Persian rule. Hakoris then entered a short-lived alliance with Sparta and Glauce, the son of the Egyptian admiral Thamos, who had supported the Persian prince Cyrus the Younger in his failed rebellion against Artaxerxes II many years earlier. Hakoris also hired the Athenian general Chabrias, though the Persian commander Pharnabazus II pressured Athens into recalling him. Domestically, Hakoris' fortunes were also waning. At least one discontented general was stirring dissent within factions of the Egyptian army, Nakhtnebef, better known by the Greek version of his name, Nectanebo of Sebennytos. In 380 BC, Hakoris died, and the throne passed to his son, Nepherites II. It was likely at this point that Nectanebo made his move. After only a few months, he overthrew Nepherites II to become Egypt's new ruler and the founder of what would be its 30th and final native dynasty. But more on him in the next episode of Ancient Egypt, Dynasty by Dynasty. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. I'd also like to thank the channel's patrons for making videos like this possible. These include, but are certainly not limited to, XXIX, Yap de Graaf, Pasta Frola, Michael Lewis, Daniel Allen, Danny Van Eck, Lennox TV, Robert Morgan, Strobex, Frank, Tim Lane, Sebastian Notaro Korea, Michael Trudell, Leader Titan, Micah G, John Scarberry, Andrew Bomer, Connor Dolson, Krish, David R, Stephen Ball, Gabe, Monty Grimes, Franz Robbins, Cyrus Mir, Diane Astra, Nimrod Nir, Hypnosan, Brendan Redbin, Faridun Dadachanji, Jimmy Darawala, Anahita Debu, Gulistan Debu, Sher Kam, Farhad Kama, and all of the channel's patrons on Patreon for helping to support this and all future content. Check out the benefits to being a Patreon member, and if you'd like to join, feel free to click the link in the video description. You can also follow History with Sai on Instagram, Facebook, and X, formerly known as Twitter, as well as continue to listen to special audio programs on the History with Sai podcast. Thanks again, and stay safe.